It is the appointed hour. Call to order the April 12th Design Review Board meeting. Second order of business is to approve the minutes from our previous meeting on March the 8th. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes? Yes. Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second. We've had a motion to approve and a second. All in favor? Opposed to like sign. Motion carries. The next order of business is our first public hearing, DRB 2023-04. This is a request for certificate of appropriateness for operation of a flea market to be located at 711 South Irby Street, specifically identified as Florence County Tax Map number 90089-01-006 in the D1 Redevelopment Overlay District and SICOD Irby Street Corridor Overlay District. Staff's report.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for filling in, Mr. Collins. So the applicant is proposing to operate a flea market, and they've likened it to the Florence Flea Market on East Palmetto Street. The use is permitted if the conditions of the UDO are met, and the DRB, but the DRB must approve the site plan, including the aesthetics of the project, to ensure compliance with the city's downtown design guidelines. So here's a vicinity map. This is formerly Orangeland Seafood Restaurant. You can still see the restaurant on the aerials. Was damaged by fire October 6, 2020. It was demoed in January of 2021. The owner initially planned to rebuild, and they came before the Design Review Board and received approval February 10th, 2021. The owner has since decided not to rebuild and moved out to West Lucas Street at formerly Angelo's Seafood, 1243 West Lucas Street. So right now this property is just a vacant lot. It is zoned activity center. It is in the Irby Street corridor and also the redevelopment overlay district. So the proposal from the applicant, New Alpha Community Development Corporation, would like to operate an outdoor market at this location. They would like to plant trees and shrubs indigenous to South Carolina. They would like to set up booths, have spots for mobile food vendors, food trucks. They would like to operate 26 weeks out of the year, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, in compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance. The market will be open from 8 to 6. The market will from and that has the hours. They would like to sell fresh local produce, food prepared from vehicles and vendors, and also clothing and household products. So here's a site plan that we received today, showing the location and proposed use, vendor tents. They do have a couple of spots for food trucks, and Irby Street's on the right, and of course they have front along their rear as well, and then they have a driveway running on the south of the property that will allow access. And here are some elevations. This is looking west from Irby Street, and those are in your packets that you received. This is looking north, so the left side of the market. And then the front and left side view. Here's some site photos. As you can see, you can just see the dirt from where the building pad was, and right now you can see Kingdom Living Temple to the northwest, and then you also have, this is directly adjacent to the Belmont Apartments new construction. So the Unified Development Ordinance, this would be considered a temporary special event A. It can have up to 1,500 people by the permit, and it does permit things like outdoor bazaars, flea markets. So these are the conditions, performance standards that must be met for staff to give approval. It has to be on a non-residential lot. That it sets that it can only be no more than 26 times per year, which is what the applicant is proposing. The parking, motor vehicles, they're expecting a maximum occupancy of 45, the applicant is. So that would call for 20 parking spaces, which is what they're proposing. And then also additional conditions can be placed on this by either staff and obviously design review board. So as far as the design guidelines, this is not a prohibited use in the Irby Street Corridor Overlay District. Anything that is permitted in the activity center would be permitted in the Irby Street Corridor Overlay District per the design guidelines. It does give specifics for materials, landscaping, fencing and screening, signage in various parts of the design guidelines and specifically Chapter 8. But at this time, we do not have those details to show you. So that does conclude staff's report.
Any questions of staff? I've got a couple of questions. On the restroom accommodations, how are those being accommodated?
At this time, normally when we do a temporary special event, we'll have porta-johns and we just need to see that on the site plan. I'm not sure if Kingdom Living will be used to accommodate restrooms. That the applicant is here if we wanted to question him on that.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Those 3 restrooms will be available.
Can we ask you staff questions on that, and then we'll?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So that was my first question. How did the occupancy load or the calculations for the population, how was that generated? Instead of just assigning it a number, what is the, because you can say I'm going to have 45 people there, but if you had 145, what is the calculation method?
We haven't seen a formula. 45 was thrown out by the design engineer. The staff did send some plan review comments, and one of the biggest things we were worried about was traffic accommodations, right? If you go over that number, would they have parking agreements in place within 300 feet to accommodate larger crowds, and how would you cap that 45 number?
Any other questions of staff?
Just one quick question. I would assume that like all the vendor tents or each event, they remove those, they're taken down, and then the next week or whatever, they go back up. Is that how it works?
We're unsure at this time.
So, along those same lines, the original packet that we received, this is a supplement to that, correct? So we're looking at this for the first time.
That's right. We got those today.
Okay. So I guess the question, based on your understanding, which ones of these facilities would be permanent and which ones would be temporary or not permanent? Do you know?
That would be hard to say. Maybe the central tent that actually says the Amani Market, I'm sure if they were going to place a sign, that might be permanent, but I'm unsure.
Any other questions of staff?
That was my only thing too, is traffic. Traffic's kind of like water. It's going to find the place of least resistance, and if you get unexpected numbers, how will that affect the places around it?
Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of the applicant? You can step up to the microphone, identify yourself. Maybe some of these questions could be posed to you.
Yes, thank you very much. So I'm Reverend Leo Woodbury. I'm the Executive Director of the New Alpha Community Development Corporation. 501c3 organization. I'm also the pastor for Kingdom Living Temple. So we would provide any agreement for additional parking. We have 23 additional parking spaces that could be used, and we would open up our church for restrooms and anything else, any other space we would need to use to support the market.
So, Reverend Woodway, could you answer the question, which on the site plan, there are several buildings, or at least identified. So obviously the tents would be mobile. Those would go up and down during the course of the time, but what buildings or what structures would be permanent?
So we were looking at doing similar to what's out at the current flea market, having something that looks like an open shed. That should be one of the drawings that you see.
Okay.
And the rest of the tents would be temporary. They would be taken down every year.
And do we have any specifics on that open shed look? As it is, like color and so forth?
No, sir. Materials, no. Also landscaping, we do not have any particulars at this time.
And of course, we'd be, in addition to, we know that we have to plant indigenous trees and shrubs. And last year, we actually donated 100 indigenous trees to the city of Florence. So we have a listing of what those would be like. And in terms of what color it should be, we have no problem with being in compliance with whatever the design review board asks us to do.
This is a kind of a question for staff. Well, now that you've given us that information, now that we have a little clarification on the structures, is there any way that staff could derive an occupancy load from the square footages of those structures?
I'm sure that we could.
That is something that we can certainly work with our fire marshal building department.
And I guess my
develop.
reason for that is, again, there was a premise that there was going to be 45 occupants, which would generate 20 parking spots. So I guess my question is, if you had a facility that could accommodate considerably more than that, then that could generate numbers that would exceed those calculations. And I guess I'm just trying to work backwards from
That's right.
not what number was posed, but what I see could be accommodated. Does that make sense? So if you had a building that was big enough for 75 people, then you could expect potentially 75 people. Just like if you have a restaurant that's a certain size, that generates an occupancy number. And I just want to kind of get some clarification. So now that we have this footprint, and there's no way to know exactly how big
That's correct.
that is based on this, but that might be something that could be generated.
Yeah, this would be something that would be required to obviously go through building permitting review, and moving forward, whatever is determined by the building official and fire marshal, it could potentially cause the applicant to have to come back to amend their request. Again, depending on what is determined as far as occupancy limits.
I've got one more question, Reverend. So on the site plan, there's a lot of parking on there. Is that gravel parking, paved parking? What's the nature of that? Because right now, if I'm not mistaken, the property is all unimpervious
It has
material, correct?
there's in the front some of the asphalt still remains,
Okay.
But it has been through the demolition process. A lot of it has been removed.
So can you tell us what that parking material is planned to be? What
Well,
you,
because we're in the conservation, we would like to keep it the way that it is, but if it isn't, then we would
if those materials were delineated, maybe there could also be some analysis by staff as far as what the impact would be.
That's right.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Okay.
In, I guess, much like the current flea market that we have, there seems to be a high percentage of trailers. Is there a way to accommodate trailers to people bringing goods to your market?
Well, we just have the truck spaces, and so in terms of having produce, we would bring that in. We're actually working with 6 farmers right now, and I just left a group of people where we're planning on applying for funding from the Federal Inflation Reduction Act, which, as you know, is $859 billion. Some money has already come to our state, and so we're planning on accessing some of that funding in order to move the produce in. So we won't have trailers sitting there. We'll be bringing the produce in ourselves. The farmers will bring it to us, and we'll set it up.
So when you say flea market, I had the impression it was more like user goods and less produce, because that's kind of the current flea market we have now. There's a lot of personal items. Will there be no personal items and that type of thing there?
Look, we'll have, as he said, home household products, but we also want to have produce. Right now, as we all know, the cost of food has skyrocketed, and there's a lot of funding and a big drive towards developing local economies and also having more food sustainability and sovereignty. So we're going to be working closely with farmers and providing as much food, fresh produce as we can, which will also help people, because we know that we also have significant number of food deserts in our city, and having those food deserts and people having a lack of access to fresh produce means that, as McLeod or anyone will tell you, that means we have a lot of people with pre-existing conditions like diabetes, hypertension, etc., which made people more prone to contract COVID and get sick and become fatalities. So we think it's of the utmost importance that we make sure that we're providing fresh produce so the citizens of this city can be healthier, and that when we get another pandemic, which I wish I could say if, but experts already said are preparing for another one, that perhaps we'll have more people who have access to fresh produce, we'll have less pre-existing condition, and perhaps be able to have fewer people next time around who are hospitalized or become fatalities. So fresh produce is definitely going to be something that we're going to be pushing for the good of our citizens.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
This is kind of for staff and the applicant, but just saw that it'd be open on Sundays, and then obviously you're probably having church on Sundays for with the parking. Like, are those going to kind of piggyback off each other, or would they be at the same time? Because I know at grocery stores, you can be open early on Sunday, but I didn't know at the flea market if it would open after the church hours.
We actually have evening service from 4
That'd be the
to
opposite.
6 p.m. And so when time comes to close it up, we'll actually be ending our church services. We don't have morning service. We have evening service.
So they would be at different times.
Right. And we have, and as I said, we have 23 additional parking spaces with the church where they can park.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, you be excused.
Okay,
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on behalf for or against the project?
I'd like to speak against it.
Okay, coming up and identify yourself. State your name.
My name is Dewey Bowers. I own the adjoining property at 713 South 3rd Street, operated as a State Farm Insurance Office. Couple of things I'd like to note. In an earlier comment, they said that's only, you can have up to 1,500 people at those events. Another note was there's 45 parking spaces with an additional 23 at the church. I'd like for you to come look at that property and tell me where you're gonna put 45 cars. Unless you park the cars where he's bound on putting up the tents and stuff, that's the only way you're gonna get 45 cars on there. My main concern is, my understanding is this redevelopment of Irby Street was to enhance Irby Street and improve it. I think this is in direct conflict with that. I don't think that's an improvement to Irby Street. Secondly, I think that's going to decrease our property values from not only mine, but these other folks with surrounding businesses. Thirdly, when they do have this overflow of people, where are they going to park? It's going to be on our parking lots. We're the ones left with cleaning up the litter after everybody leaves. Those are my concerns. Any questions for me?
No, thank you for your time. Any other, anybody else like to speak for or against the project? Recognize?
And can I just say, we've been at that, Kingdom Living Temple has been at that location for 5 years. There's never been a problem with cleanup. That includes us blocking off the street and having outdoor events. We always make sure that the property is left clean. It's never been a problem in 5 years.
You can state your name and
Sherry Springs. I operate Basin's Restaurant, and I agree with Mr. Powell. They're going to be parking in our parking spots when theirs fills up. Because if you're going to have 1,500 people out there, or anything over 45 people out there, where are they going to park? There's really not a whole lot of options. There's us, him, her, them, and I need my parking spots for my customers. They're talking about putting food vendors across the street from me, multiple of them. That's really going to hurt us. We're going to be responsible for cleaning up the messes. We already have a great problem with homeless people just hanging out. It's just going to give them somewhere else to hang out and in that area, so they're going to be there even more. I mean, I think it's against every business in that area.
thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Come up and identify yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Vicki Custis Underwood, and we have property that would be beside the flea market, and our concerns are their concerns. The parking, if they park at Basin and crossing the street, the safety of people crossing the streets, and our concern is the devalue of our property. I agree with Mr. Powers, I believe it was, when he was speaking of the property value, and we're trying to improve that area. Also, we've already got, from my understanding, we've got the flea market out on 7650, whatever, and then there's another one that's downtown. Am I correct with that? Anna?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I thought so. But anyway, so, I mean, why do we need another one? And I appreciate the fact that they want to, bring in fresh produce for others or whomever would like to come, but we already have that. So those are just our concerns, especially with the parking and the safety of people being on Irby Street with, we don't know how many possible people are going to come. So those are our concerns.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am. You come up and identify yourself.
Yes, I'm Jacqueline O'Dell. My family owns the building across the street, 702, 700 South Irby Street. And we already deal with the homelessness behind our building, the trash that they leave, I could put the grocery items and stuff there. And I just think this market, with this open market, what a place for them to then, provide more shelter, open shelter for them to come to, and be a real problem. And the parking also is a real problem here, because we also would be providing parking for those people. And crossing Irby Street, that's not an easy street to cross over there, So, like you said, the safety of people coming to the market.
All right, thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
name is J.B. Costas, and I'm talking about 703 South Irving. My main concern is back in 2010, 2012, somewhere in the overlay district, and all said they're going to be starting to beautify that area. Where are you? Where are we? I mean, I don't see anything being done. I see it going the other way. Now, doing this, I'm not saying it's going to be a bad thing, but I'm not going to say it's a good thing either, because I see out on the, going towards the beach, but that over there, it looks like beach run down. Of course, it's been there for years. We've got problems that we need to take care of and beautify Florence inside the city. This is not going to help either. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? That closes the public portion of our case. Any discussion, open discussion within the group? Yeah, excuse me. Yes.
The follow-up after today, what's the procedures? Because I don't know. Like, after you have this, then what's your next steps?
Okay, and
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
certainly speak to that. It will, obviously, a lot of this will be dependent upon what the board decides. What I would compare this process to is what we often do with what we call sketch plan approval, like with a new subdivision. So this is at the conceptual level of the details. What the board's role is here. The use is permitted. It is the board's role to, one, determine if it's allowable as it's submitted, what additional, it being within downtown and the overlay district, what requirements should be placed upon this development in order to meet the intent and goals of the district. After, depending on what the board decides, there will be a final development plan review and approval where we will require additional details on the plan. It will go through building permitting as well as more detailed look at occupancy load, what the parking requirements will be, further landscape requirements, depending. And again, a lot of this is dependent upon the board's decision on if and when this is permitted.
yeah, excuse me. Yes. Actually, we need to not have questions from the group. If you're going to say something, you need to come up, identify yourself, so we can put it on the record. We can kind of keep that order. That'll help us a lot.
All right, Jacqueline O'Dell, I just want to say I recommend each one of you go buy that piece of property and get out and look at it. Because I just don't see how this is going to work. With tents, a main big tent, little tents, and then parking, all that goes in there.
Thank you. And all of us have received these cases prior to this meeting, so we have all had it in the location. So we've all had an opportunity. I'm not going to say we've all been by there. I have, but we have all had the opportunity to go by.
Good.
Any other discussion among the group?
This is, I guess, a question for staff. The market that we currently have is a city-funded.
The city center market?
Right.
Yes, it is. It's a city-owned and operated market.
Right. Okay. Is there a vacancy rate, or is it 100% leased up every Saturday? I believe it is.
So typically we have we have the capacity of about 40 vendors.
Okay.
Right now there is availability in there, and there's always the opportunity to apply and try to get approved to become a vendor at that facility.
Okay.
and if staff could maybe listen and might clarify some of this. So from a zoning standpoint, from a compliance standpoint, from a usage standpoint, does the staff not see any conflict or compliance issues with the actual usage of this on this proposed use on this piece of property?
There is, while it is permitted within the activity center, I guess what I will do is let's remove this from the downtown overlay districts and place it at another location where that has not occurred. We would not be going through this, obviously, this process. There's much further detail that we would need to make determinations on parking, as well as landscape requirements, and then there are also certain. Derek, if you want to.
Oh yeah. So obviously you brought up sanitation. Making sure that noise is controlled past a certain time. So this table are standards that must be met before we can permit it. So it is a pretty good list of things to be good stewards and neighbors to be permitted.
And a lot of times, something of this nature requires a commitment from the applicant, being that it's they're not going to operate outside of X hours. They're not going to have any loud music or anything of that nature that imposes upon the neighboring properties. And at any time, like any business or use within the city, that anyone steps outside of those boundaries, and enforcement action is applied. Certainly parking is a concern, and building occupancy. We would go through, moving forward, again, if this was outside, we would be going through a more detailed process with them to make final determinations and decisions.
And the reason why I brought those questions up about compliance is as the design review board, it's my understanding that from design review board, we're not the planning group, we're not zoning. We are generally our role is to review proposed projects and evaluate them as they comply or relate to the design guidelines for the city of Florence in the overlay districts that they reside in. So to me, I guess questions about usage, zoning, those kind of things, to me are not as critical for this group as the design aspects of the project. And unfortunately, the information that's provided to us, which was basically zero prior to this meeting, and we were handed some additional design guideline information as we walked into this meeting. We really do not, in my opinion, even with that information, we don't have enough information, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, to evaluate this project as it relates to the design guidelines. I mean, what we have is a very, very rough conceptual sketch that we really can't evaluate from an architectural standpoint, design standpoint. It's merely a sketch, and I guess those are my biggest concerns as our role is that we don't have anything really to evaluate. Size of the buildings, materials, again, occupancy load, how that generates parking, and then parking requirements. What are those parking and drive areas made out of? All those things are generally provided before we come to this meeting, and we have that information to discuss. And I guess that's kind of where I am personally, is that I don't have enough information here to approve it from a personal standpoint, because I don't see, it's just a bunch of blanks we have to fill in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would just add that it's tough for us to go by anything but numbers. And I mean, one number is 45 and one number is 1,500. And like, even if the intent was more just for like a market for church members, that's probably going to be more like 45. But if the intent's for the city of Florence and for it to grow, now you're looking at the possibility of 1,500. And I mean, if we're going to design it based off of a 45, you almost need something like a maximum capacity of 45, some way to enforce afterwards. Because once we approve it, then the question's enforcing it. Will that happen? Will it not? We're in a situation now by Freedom Florence where it was actually a city or county event where we just had a massive number of people that overtook both of our parking lots. Lucky for us, the city has taken many steps to try to prevent it from happening again and work with us, but they're not required to do that. Like, we work together, and even if these businesses all found a way to work together, who's to say who's going to be the owner a year from now or 2 years from now? So you almost have to, from our standpoint, take the worst case scenario. So if we have 45, 1,500, like, until we have further information, we have to go by 1,500, which is going to be a nightmare for that area, whether it ever really happens or not. Like what Scott was saying, there's just so much, like, we're not sure, we don't know, and it's hard for us to make a decision based off so many variables. And it's not just 45 to 60, it's like dozens to over 1,000. So
I'm going to chime in as well. I've got to agree with both of you. I just don't think there's enough information for us to do what we're supposed to do. So I would ask maybe staff to explain to the applicant what the process is from here, because if I understand, if we vote this down, then there are results, but I think the applicant has some options, and if you would, Clint, if you don't mind explaining it to them.
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess if we voted and we voted in favor of it, then we have an approval. If we vote not in favor of it or to vote it negatively, then what are the time implications for the applicant to reapply?
If it is denied, it would require 1 year before they could reapply for the project.
Okay, and if this action was deferred to another meeting where more information was gathered and presented so that we could have a clearer understanding, what are the implications there? So could it be just deferred on a monthly basis? How does that work?
Lucky enough, we have just recently gone through this process with the City Council. As the board, you're somewhat limited as to deferral or tabling a motion based upon Robert's rules, which is what we follow. While the board cannot table or defer a matter, the applicant can request deferral for as long as they see fit. That may be something that we request as an applicant, and if they were to refuse that, then at that point the board would need to make a decision.
Our role, and this is not an official statement, but I can say that, and we have not discussed this case among ourselves. Okay, so I have no idea, other than what I've heard and learned today, I have no idea what these other folks feel about this project. But if there was a motion and this thing was brought up and it was denied, it would be a year before this could be brought back up. If the applicant was interested in deferring this until more information could be presented, it's my personal opinion that it would give us a clearer picture of what your intentions are and how it relates to and complies with the design guidelines. So I guess that is something you may want to consider prior to us voting.
Yes, the deferral is acceptable for us.
Say that again, excuse me?
I said it's
It is?
Like a deferral.
Okay. So the applicant has asked to defer the case?
Yes. The board will need to.
Okay. So the applicant has asked to defer the case. Entertain a motion?
Second that. Well,
Okay. Motion to accept the applicant's
a motion to accept the deferral to a later date.
And we have a second. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries.
And that can, based upon how we progress, we will, that can continue as long as necessary for the applicant to put together.
And I would just say that for me personally, and from what I'm hearing here, I think that there needs to be some of these questions about occupant load, parking, design, features, compliance, materials. I think those are the kinds of informations that would make us feel that we could give it a clear sort of vision on what you guys are proposing, so we could do a better job of evaluating it. Okay? So that concludes that case. Y'all are welcome to stay or leave. The next case on the agenda today is, if I'm not mistaken, is case number DRB 2023-05. Staff's report.
Good afternoon. This is a little simpler.
Thank you.
A lot more straightforward. This is a request for a certificate of appropriateness to do renovations to the outside of the house located at 501 North Irby Street. This is also in the Irby Street Corridor Overlay District as well as the D1 Redevelopment Overlay District. They want to install new roofing, new siding, and new fascia, and paint the house. It is located at the corner of Sumter Street and North Irby Street, right across from the Hope Health Hospital and next to the U-Haul. It's pretty much the only residential property south of Lucas Street on Irby. This is a closer picture of it, the location. As you can see around it, most of the houses around it have been torn down. It's kind of by itself on that corner. It is zoned commercial reuse, which is a light commercial use, but it can also still be used as a single family. And these are some photos of it. As you can see, it's in kind of rough shape. It was built, I think, in the 1920s. The request is to remove the siding, which looks like it's aluminum now, and replace it with vinyl siding. Take off the fascia on it, and replace that with white vinyl siding, or white metal fascia, sorry. And then just repaint everything that's red. I believe they're going to paint that white. And then also replace the roof with a black shingle roof. And they've already started doing work on the interior. So the scope of work includes replacing the existing brown shingle roof with black architectural shingles, replace the white aluminum siding with tan vinyl siding, replace the red wood fascia with white aluminum fascia, paint the windows and doors white, the trim instead of the red, and then do some repair work as needed, especially around the porch. So basic form and character of the house will be preserved. They are replacing the roof and the siding, and the main change will be the colors and also the fact that it is 1914, I was wrong, that they're going to replace the aluminum siding, which is not original, with vinyl siding. And the new windows and doors have not been proposed. The height will not be affected. The locations of doors and windows will not be changed. And there's been no landscaping or anything else proposed for it. And the roof style will not change as well. So, and the remainder of the structures in the area are commercial of various years and styles, and then again the vacant parcels next to it. So as far as affecting the character of the neighborhood it's in, there's not a whole lot to compare it to. So that concludes staff's report.
Any questions of staff? Do we know the intention, just curious, of the,
As far as I know, it's still residential.
okay. Any questions? Any other questions?
I'll move we approve, just presuming.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
See, nice and easy.
Okay.
Let's deny this we got here.
The next case is DRB 2023-06. Staff's report.
And very similar to the last one, this is a request for certificate of appropriateness for renovations to a commercial building located at 265 West Evans Street in the H1 Historic Overlay District. And the applicant is wants to paint the building and add new signage to it. It's here between Irby Street and Coit Street on the north side of West Evans in the 200 block. And it is zoned Central Business District. This is a photo of the outside of it. Currently, it's a mixture of stucco and brick, and the brick consists of several different colors of brick. And the proposal is to add wall signage, and the wall signage meets the design guidelines in the materials and the dimensions as well as the size. And these are the colors that they're going to use. The front walls, they want to paint the brick because there's a disparity in the brick color. They want to paint the brick and the stucco areas that Serengeti grass color with the darker tan. The trim, the corners, and the lintels, they want to do in the lighter tan. And then the roof trim and the door and that little detail on the top there would be in the black. So that, according to the design guidelines, they will be permanently painting over the brick, which is something that the guidelines definitely require y'all's approval for. The building was built in 1974, so it's not particularly historic yet. They're not going to use any aluminum or vinyl. The windows and doors will stay in the same place. And the main change will be just the colors to the materials and the covering up of the brick. So that concludes staff's report.
Any questions of staff?
Elaine, will you go back to the picture with the color scheme? And so the brick itself will be painted, that top one, right?
That's right.
Okay.
So the walls and the pediment there, I think it's the name of it, will match. And then the trim work will be a little bit lighter. And then the roof trim and the door will be the black.
Do you have any more questions, John?
Yeah.
Is there enough information here for the staff to be able to reach a conclusion as to the compliance of the signage?
Yes, and it is described in your packet. The sign, it is three-dimensional and made out of the proper materials, and it meets the size. And I was discussing it with the applicant, and apparently there are 2 units in this building, and there may be additional signage if they get a second tenant. So we would determine if it was similar to this one, if they just wanted to put up 2 signs like that, we could certainly do that administratively, or if it's something completely different, we would bring it back to y'all.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of the applicant? You have anything to say? You need to say anything? Okay. If we have any questions, we may. I did have a question. If you could come up and ask it, just make it official. Barry, state your name.
Baron Urban.
Is there a project or a building that I was a little bit surprised at the black trim. Is there any project that you kind of have seen that kind of, because the only negative that I can think of is that we don't have the ability to see what this is going to look like. We have a picture of the as-built, and we have how it's going to, we have it earmarked, so to speak. But I was a little bit surprised on the black rake trim there on the pitch. But I was just curious if there was a project that y'all saw that you were sort of emulating, or whether it was just a selection.
I'll tell you this, the colors that are picked out were picked out by the tenant,
Okay.
prospective tenant, so I don't know. I don't know where they came up with that.
Okay. And that would be my only.
If it looks bad, we'll probably repaint it.
And that's
Don't
just
say that.
just from my experience. You don't see too many buildings with black rake trim, going up with the gable. So that was the only thing that jumped out at me. Other than that, I think it's going to give it a much more homogeneous look and kind of more stately, and it'd be a definite improvement.
And I think the painting will probably be done in the next week or so. I mean, they've finished painting the inside, so they're ready to start on the outside. So as they start to paint it, I might get them to just paint some of it.
Okay.
Give you a call or go and look at it before we.
And I don't know how, if they did decide to change, I don't know how that could be handled from a staff standpoint. I mean, I personally, it just hit me a little bit sideways, but other than that.
Well, these are historically accurate colors,
Yeah.
so I think if the staff could use our discretion.
Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve as submitted with staff's I guess with staff's approval on any changes.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay. I sure do like Jamie.
You did a masterful job, Chairman.
Our first case was a good one. It was a tough one.
Yeah, thank you.
I think the obviously the purpose is wonderful to just helping the community, which is just too many unanswered questions.
I might make a suggestion to staff, again, that the easy stuff, if we could put it first, it might be better for Mr. Irvin anyway.
I always like to remind the board and the public, for that matter, when an applicant comes to the city and they make a request, and we always obviously work very hand in hand and closely with them and try to guide them in the best direction to be successful. Anytime an applicant requests to be on the board or go before board, city council, whatever it may be, whether we they have that right, and we have to move forward with that. So sometimes it is, I think it provides support to staff, such as this matter, where it allows us to demonstrate that, to the applicant that these are requirements, and emphasizes the.
Is there any way, and I guess that's actually a pretty good topic real quick, because clearly the information that was provided and the timing of that information was inadequate and delinquent. So I guess my question is there any way is there any means for that not to come up here if you don't have the properly submitted information?
Okay. It sounds as though there may be an effort to try to gain approval so that a decision could be made regarding purchase of the property. It sounds like there may have been a timeline placed on that.
Okay.
Can you repeat your question?
I was just saying, if you see whenever they're assembling their information to provide
Yes.
for our packets, if you see that information is either delinquent or inadequate, is there any way for you to not let them submit? for a meeting.
No,
In other words, come back when you have all the things that they are going to need to pass judgment on your project.
Right. There is, if they are not compliant with what's required for application, we certainly reserve the right to inform them of that, to notify them, and also notify the board or whatever it may be. But if the request is made, we do have to
Get them on the agenda.
So Clint, if they give us information at the last minute, like sitting right here, we have to vote it up or down, or they have to request deference.
That's right.
So we can't say we just got this. We can't vote on this. That's not an option for us. You can get back when you got that.
I would say any board requires adequate time to review the application, and if that requirement is not met, then I think
It could be grounds for not approval.
For not approving.
Right.
Exactly.
And I'm trying to read sort of what you're saying, and I might be misinterpreting some things, but to me, there's a major difference if they just didn't have the answers in their requested versus they were advised they didn't have enough information, but they wanted to push forward anyway. To me, I mean, I'm more likely to vote that down than we made a mistake coming too early, but no one's told us that. Then we're requesting, then you grant it. But it'd be nice to know who's pushing to get on the.
I think a lot of times our residents and business owners don't have a full understanding of the seriousness that the Designer Review Board holds and what they are charged with seeing through. It is certainly. There aren't a lot of people that conduct business within overlay districts like what we have, and so where if this was again going back to if they were not in the overlay district, I would anticipate something like this. This would be kind of an ongoing process with the applicant. That would take many meetings, working with their engineer or architect or whoever and guiding them on how to do that. If the board was not involved, then right now we could not approve. Staff would not approve that because we do not have enough information to make a decision. We would need much further information. Now, we certainly there's a balancing act for applicants like this too, to where it's important for them to get before the board before they go too far down that road, because the requirements that may be placed upon them could be doing a lot of work that is unnecessary, and it may have to change them completely. So,
but from the other folks who are adjacent neighbors and others, had this not been in an overlay district, there would be no vehicle for them to voice their displeasure or whatever, because from a zoning standpoint, there was compliance.
right.
Like, so normally, if this had not been an overlay district, there would be no hearing for them, correct?
That's right.
And it would just have been the
process
applicant going
working through all the
through
departments.
the normal steps through the city. Okay. All right. Thank y'all.
Good job, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to find out when Jamie's not going to be here. I'm also not going to be here. How are you doing?
Good job, sir.